Hey guys, tonight we wake up in the misty highlands of medieval Scotland, where the air smells of wet grass, peat smoke, and cold stone, and your most valuable companions have 4 legs, thick wool, and an astonishing talent for wandering in exactly the wrong direction. The hills roll away into endless shades of green and gray, hidden beneath drifting fog that seems determined to keep every secret it has guarded for centuries. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls, and the wind carries the faint bleating of sheep scattered across the hillside. Your entire day depends on finding them before they decide that every cliff looks like a perfectly reasonable place to explore. You probably won't survive this if you expect sheep to listen to instructions. They certainly never did back then, and they are not about to start now. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is joining tonight's journey from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes before the sun has even considered climbing above the highland ridges. There is no alarm clock. There is no gentle melody. Instead, the cold itself wakes you. It slips through the gaps in the rough wooden walls of your tiny stone croft, brushes across your face, and quietly reminds you that medieval Scotland is not especially interested in your comfort. Your blanket is made from coarse wool. It is warm enough once you've been underneath it all night, but stepping away from it feels like making a very questionable life decision. Outside, darkness still clings to the valley. Only a faint silver line along the eastern horizon hints that morning is approaching. The peat fire in the middle of the room has burned down into glowing embers. You stir it carefully with an iron poker until tiny orange sparks dance upward. Soon the fire crackles again. Its warmth spreads slowly. Not quickly enough, but enough. The croft smells of smoke that has soaked into every beam and every piece of clothing you own. To someone from another age, it might seem overwhelming. To you, it simply smells like home. You pull on a thick wool tunic that feels slightly damp despite hanging near the fire overnight. Dry clothing is a luxury when nearly every day begins wrapped in mist. Over that goes a heavier cloak fastened with a simple pin. Leather shoes wait beside the doorway. Calling them comfortable would require a very active imagination. Still, they are sturdy enough for another day crossing rocky hillsides. Outside, the world is almost silent. Grass glitters with dew. Tiny beads of water cling to every blade, catching the earliest hints of dawn. Mist drifts low across the valley floor. The mountains rise like enormous sleeping giants, their peaks disappearing into pale clouds. Every direction looks endless. Every hill hides another hill beyond it. The highlands are beautiful in a quiet, patient sort of way. Not dramatic, not loud. Simply vast. A loyal sheepdog stretches near the doorway. He yawns, shakes his thick coat, and looks at you with the expression of someone who already knows today's schedule. Find sheep, move sheep, rescue sheep from decisions sheep should never have made. Repeat until sunset. You scratch behind his ears. He seems satisfied with this arrangement. Breakfast is wonderfully uncomplicated. A small piece of oat bread, a wedge of hard cheese, perhaps a little ale watered down enough to be safer than questionable stream water collected near busy paths. Fresh milk, if one of the ewes has recently been milked. Nobody is expecting a grand feast. Food is fuel, simple, reliable. Enough. As you eat, daylight slowly spills across the landscape. Birds begin singing. A curlew calls somewhere beyond the marsh. Its lonely whistle echoes through the valley. Nearby, a pair of crows argue over something invisible in the grass. Even nature appears to have morning conversations before getting to work. You gather your shepherd's crook. It is smooth from years of use. The wood fits comfortably into your hand. This stick is more than a walking aid. It guides sheep, moves branches, tests muddy ground, steadies you on steep slopes, occasionally reminds particularly stubborn rams that charging people is considered poor manners, although they rarely agree. The sheepdog circles excitedly. He already hears the distant bleating carried by the breeze. Somewhere over the next rise, your flock has spent the night grazing. Hopefully together. Hopefully. Experience suggests otherwise. You begin walking. The earth beneath your boots is soft from yesterday's rain. Heather brushes gently against your legs. Wildflowers bloom in patches wherever the rocky soil allows. Purple, yellow, white. Tiny bursts of color scattered across the green hills. The air tastes wonderfully fresh, cold enough that every breath feels clean. Clouds drift lazily overhead. Sunlight occasionally breaks through, illuminating one hillside while leaving another wrapped in shadow. The highlands never look exactly the same for more than a few minutes. Weather changes its mind constantly. You climb steadily. The path is little more than flattened grass created by generations of shepherds making the same journey. Long before roads reach these hills, footsteps connected villages. The land remembers every one of them. Soon you hear them. Soft bleats, then louder ones. Around the next slope, the flock comes into view. Dozens of woolly shapes scattered across the hillside like oversized clouds that somehow learn to eat grass. Most are peacefully grazing. One appears fascinated by a bush. Another is staring thoughtfully at absolutely nothing. A lamb bounds happily beside its mother before suddenly sprinting in the opposite direction for reasons known only to lambs. The sheepdog glances at you. Without a word, both of you understand the assignment. He moves gracefully around the edge of the flock, not chasing, not frightening, simply encouraging everyone to stay together. Centuries of careful breeding have made him remarkably good at convincing sheep that his excellent ideas were actually theirs. You walk among the animals slowly, no rushing, no shouting. The calmest shepherd usually has the calmest flock. Each sheep represents valuable wool, future lambs, and the livelihood of your household. You quietly check their legs for injuries, their eyes, their coats. The air tastes wonderfully fresh, cold enough that every breath feels clean. Clouds drift lazily overhead. Sunlight occasionally breaks through, illuminating one hillside while leaving another wrapped in shadow. The highlands never look exactly the same for more than a few minutes. Weather changes its mind constantly. You climb steadily. The path is little more than flattened grass created by generations of shepherds making the same journey. Long before roads reach these hills, footsteps connected villages. The land remembers every one of them. Soon you hear them. Soft bleats, then louder ones. Around the next slope, the flock comes into view. Dozens of woolly shapes scattered across the hillside like oversized clouds that somehow learn to eat grass. Most are peacefully grazing. One appears fascinated by a bush. Another is staring thoughtfully at absolutely nothing. A lamb bounds happily beside its mother before suddenly sprinting in the opposite direction for reasons known only to lambs. The sheepdog glances at you. Without a word, both of you understand the assignment. He moves gracefully around the edge of the flock, not chasing, not frightening, simply encouraging everyone to stay together. Centuries of careful breeding have made him remarkably good at convincing sheep that his excellent ideas were actually theirs. You walk among the animals slowly, no rushing, no shouting. The calmest shepherd usually has the calmest flock. Each sheep represents valuable wool, future lambs, and the livelihood of your household. You quietly check their legs for injuries, their eyes, their coats. A shepherd notices small problems before they become serious ones. That awareness comes only after countless mornings exactly like this one. The sun finally clears the distant ridge. Golden light washes across the highlands. Mist begins lifting from the valley floor. Stone walls emerge from the fog. Tiny crofts become visible in the distance. Smoke rises gently from their chimneys. Other shepherds have begun their own mornings. Though separated by miles, everyone follows nearly the same rhythm. Wake, walk, watch, wait, care, repeat. There is comfort in routines shaped by the seasons instead of clocks. Time here is measured differently. By sunrise, by lambing season, by the growth of fresh grass, by the first frost, by migrating birds, by the slow turning of another highland year. Standing quietly among the grazing sheep, listening to nothing more hurried than wind moving through the heather, you realize this life asks for patience above everything else. The hills cannot be rushed. The weather cannot be argued with. The sheep certainly cannot be negotiated with. And perhaps that is the first lesson medieval Scotland quietly offers before the day has truly begun. You take another slow breath of cool Highland air. Then, with your crook resting comfortably in your hand and your faithful dog waiting for the next gentle command, you guide the flock toward richer pasture as the peaceful morning continues to unfold. The morning has fully arrived now, though in the Highlands that mostly means the mist has become bright instead of dark. Sunlight slips through thin clouds and soft golden ribbons, touching the hills one patch at a time. One valley glows warmly, while another remains hidden beneath pale gray fog. It feels as though the landscape is waking up in slow stretches, unwilling to rush the beginning of another day. Your flock certainly has no intention of rushing anything. Most of the sheep continue grazing exactly where they stood a few moments ago, nibbling steadily at fresh grass, sprinkled with dew. They chew with remarkable dedication, as though breakfast is the single greatest responsibility in the known world. Perhaps for a sheep, it is. You lean comfortably on your shepherd's crook and quietly count heads, not because you enjoy mathematics, because sheep have a fascinating habit of becoming invisible whenever someone stops counting them. 1, 5, 12, 23, 38, 40, 41. You pause. There should be 42. You count again, still 41. The sheepdog notices your expression before you say a word. His ears perk forward. He scans the hillside with practiced confidence. Somewhere, one adventurous sheep has decided that the flock's carefully selected pasture simply wasn't exciting enough. You sigh, not dramatically, just with the quiet acceptance earned from many mornings exactly like this one. Finding wandering sheep is less an unexpected problem and more a scheduled activity. The highlands stretch endlessly before you. Gentle hills roll into larger hills. Those larger hills become mountains. Narrow glens twist between rocky slopes where streams sparkle beneath the morning light. Heather covers wide patches of ground with soft purple blossoms, filling the air with a faint earthy fragrance whenever the breeze stirs. It is breathtakingly beautiful. It is also an excellent place for losing sheep. You whistle softly. The sheepdog immediately circles toward the eastern slope, not running wildly, never rushing. A good shepherd's dog understands patience almost as well as the shepherd himself. You follow behind at an easy pace. Every step sinks slightly into damp earth softened by recent rain. Tiny wildflowers peek through the grass. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom, entirely unconcerned with your missing sheep. Above, skylarks rise into the brightening sky. Their cheerful songs float over the valley, like invisible threads connecting earth and clouds. Birdsong fills the silence without ever disturbing it. The Highlands have mastered the art of peaceful sound. Nothing shouts. Everything simply exists. As you climb a gentle rise, your boots scrape against scattered stones worn smooth by countless generations. Long before your lifetime, other shepherds crossed these same hills. Their footsteps have faded. Their voices have disappeared into history. Yet their paths remain. The land remembers. Ahead, the sheepdog freezes. His body becomes perfectly still. One paw lifted, eyes fixed toward a cluster of boulders. You smile. He has found your missing troublemaker. Sure enough, there stands a single ewe happily eating grass beside a rocky outcrop, looking entirely pleased with herself. She glances toward you. For a brief moment, it almost seems she is surprised to see anyone else here, as though this hidden corner belonged exclusively to her. You walk closer slowly, no sudden movements. Sheep rarely respond well to excitement. Calmness spreads. Panic spreads even faster. The ewe blinks once, returns to eating. Apparently she has decided you are not especially interesting. The sheepdog gently circles behind her, without barking, without chasing, simply creating a quiet suggestion that perhaps breakfast would be equally enjoyable back with everyone else. The ewe eventually agrees, not because she has been persuaded, more because continuing alone suddenly seems slightly inconvenient. You cannot help smiling. Sheep possess remarkable confidence considering how frequently they become lost. With the flock reunited, you guide everyone farther uphill toward fresher grazing land. Grass here grows thicker. The recent rains have left everything lush and green. Each careful choice of pasture matters. Healthy grass means healthy sheep. Healthy sheep produce better wool. Better wool supports your household through another winter. Everything connects. The weather, the land, the animals, the people. Nothing exists separately. As the flock spreads across the hillside, you settle onto a broad stone, warmed gently by the morning sun. For a few peaceful moments, there is nothing urgent to do. Only watch. A shepherd spends surprisingly little time moving. Much of the work involves noticing. A sheep walking differently than yesterday. Clouds building over distant mountains. A stream flowing lower than expected. Fresh animal tracks crossing muddy ground. Tiny observations become important long before larger problems appear. Patience is perhaps your greatest tool. Certainly more useful than arguing with sheep. Nearby, several lambs begin chasing one another in playful circles. Their energy seems endless. One leaps straight into the air for no obvious reason, before landing awkwardly and immediately pretending that was entirely intentional. You suspect lambs invented embarrassment long before humans did. The older sheep barely acknowledge their enthusiasm. Experience teaches calmness. Youth prefers jumping. A cool breeze sweeps across the hillside. Your cloak flutters gently. The scent of wet earth mixes with fresh grass and distant peat smoke, drifting from crofts hidden deep within the valley. Far below, thin columns of smoke rise into the still air. Families prepare meals. Blacksmiths begin heating their forges. Children carry water. Women spin wool. Farmers inspect small fields of oats and barley. Each household begins another ordinary medieval morning. No one considers it ordinary. It is simply life. The sun climbs higher. Shadows shorten. Tiny insects buzz lazily among the heather. A pair of red deer appear briefly on a distant ridge. They pause. Watch your flock, then disappear silently into the folds of the landscape as though swallowed by the hills themselves. Nature shares these highlands with you. You are not its master, only another traveler moving through its seasons. Hours pass gently. Without clocks, time reveals itself differently. You notice the changing angle of sunlight, the warmth spreading across the rocks, the sheep gradually lying down to rest after grazing. Even your faithful dog stretches beneath a patch of shade, though one eye remains half open. Professional habits never truly sleep. You drink cool water from a leather flask. Simple, refreshing. The nearby stream provides more when needed. Its clear water dances over smooth stones with a quiet melody that seems older than memory itself. You listen for a while. There is no hurry. Medieval life contains plenty of hard work, but it also contains moments impossible to schedule. A breeze, running water, birdsong, the steady rhythm of grazing sheep, silence that feels comfortably full instead of empty. You close your eyes for only a moment. The warm sun rests lightly across your face. The distant bleating rises and falls like gentle waves. Wind brushes through the heather with a whisper so soft it almost resembles breathing. When you open your eyes again, the flock has slowly drifted farther along the hillside. No emergency. Just another reminder that sheep believe maps are merely interesting suggestions. You stand. Lift your crook. The sheepdog is already beside you before you say anything at all. Together you begin walking once more across the rolling green highlands, following 42 determined little wanderers as the peaceful day stretches quietly toward afternoon. The flock has spent most of the morning wandering peacefully across the hillside, and now the sun sits comfortably above the highlands, warming the grass just enough for tiny clouds of mist to disappear into the blue sky. The air feels different now, less sharp, still cool enough that your breath occasionally lingers when a breeze sweeps across the ridge, but no longer carrying the bite of dawn. The sheep seem to notice the change before you do. Many have finished their morning meal and settle onto the grass, chewing thoughtfully while staring across the valley with the kind of calm expression only sheep can manage. Perhaps they are reflecting on life's great mysteries. Or perhaps they have simply forgotten what they were doing 5 seconds ago. Either explanation feels equally possible. Your faithful sheepdog stretches lazily beside you. One ear remains pointed toward the flock. Even while resting, he is working. His eyes occasionally follow a wandering lamb before closing again. He trusts you. You trust him. Neither of you needs many words. The hills themselves seem to encourage quiet. You decide it is time to return briefly to your croft. The sheep can remain here for a little while. The pasture is good. The hills are open enough that you can still see most of the flock from below. A shepherd learns when to stay close and when to allow the animals a little freedom. Everything in this life depends on balance. You begin walking downhill. Each step sends the scent of crushed heather rising gently beneath your boots. Bees hum softly between patches of purple blossoms. Butterflies drift lazily through the warm air. Far overhead, a hawk circles slowly, watching the valleys with patient eyes. The highlands never truly fall silent. They simply whisper instead of shout. Soon the narrow path curves between scattered stone walls built by generations long before your birth. Each rock has been placed carefully by human hands. No mortar, no cement, only patience. Stone resting upon stone until the wall becomes part of the landscape itself. Moss grows between the cracks. Tiny ferns emerge wherever moisture gathers. The walls seem almost alive. At last your croft comes into view. It is modest, one small stone building with a thick thatched roof, darkened by years of rain and smoke. A wooden door slightly uneven from countless winters. A tiny window allowing only enough light to brighten the single-room home. Compared to castles, it is humble. Compared to sleeping beneath the open sky, it is magnificent. Thin smoke rises steadily from the chimney. The familiar smell of burning peat reaches you before you reach the doorway. It is earthy, warm, comforting. You step inside. The change is immediate. Outside, the wind moves endlessly. Inside, everything feels still. The fire crackles gently in the center hearth. Its orange glow reflects softly against rough stone walls blackened by years of smoke. Bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden beams overhead. Simple wooden bowls rest neatly upon handmade shelves. A spinning wheel waits quietly in one corner. Nothing here is expensive. Everything here is useful. One member of your family is kneading oat dough upon a worn wooden table. Another carefully spins freshly cleaned wool into long strands of yarn. The steady rhythm of the spinning wheel fills the room with a soothing hum. Round and round, round and round. The sound blends naturally with the crackling fire. Neither competes with the other. Both belong here. You remove your damp cloak and hang it near the hearth. Steam rises slowly as the warmth begins drying the thick wool. It will never become perfectly dry. Scottish weather simply does not allow such optimism. Still, warm clothing feels far better than cold clothing. A small iron pot hangs above the fire. Inside, simple barley broth simmers quietly. The smell fills the croft. There is no complicated seasoning, no rich sauces. Only barley. A few onions. Perhaps a handful of herbs gathered from nearby hills. Sometimes cabbage. Occasionally bits of salted meat when fortune has been generous. Today's meal is simple. Most meals are. Yet after hours outdoors, even plain broth feels wonderfully satisfying. You sit upon a rough wooden stool, while a carved wooden bowl is placed into your hands. Warm steam rises gently toward your face. You take the first careful spoonful. It is hearty, comforting, not exciting. No medieval cook expects applause. The purpose of food is to keep people working through long days and cold winters. By that measure, this broth succeeds beautifully. Beside it rests another piece of oat bread. Dense, dark, heavy enough that someone from another century might jokingly describe it as construction material. Yet dipped into warm broth, it softens pleasantly. You eat slowly. No one rushes the meal. Conversation remains quiet. Much of it concerns practical matters. How much wool has been spun? Whether tomorrow's weather may bring rain. If one ewe seems close to giving birth. Whether the nearby stream has risen after recent storms. Life revolves around observations rather than ambitions. Nobody speaks about becoming wealthy. Surviving another winter feels accomplishment enough. When lunch finishes, wooden bowls are rinsed carefully, using precious water carried from the nearby spring. Nothing is wasted. Food scraps feed chickens. Ash from the hearth helps enrich gardens. Old clothing becomes blankets. Broken tools become handles for newer ones. Every object lives many lives before finally returning to the earth. Outside, sunlight fills the valley. Children laugh somewhere beyond the neighboring croft. Their voices drift across the fields before disappearing into the breeze. One small boy practices throwing smooth stones toward a tree stump. His aim requires considerable improvement. Fortunately, the tree stump appears patient. Nearby, an elderly woman hangs freshly washed wool upon a simple wooden frame. Bright white fleece glows beneath the afternoon sun. Soon it will become yarn. Later cloth. Eventually warm clothing protecting someone through another Highland winter. You realize nearly everything around you begins with sheep. The cloak upon your shoulders. The blanket upon your bed. The yarn being spun inside. The trade goods carried to distant villages. Your flock is not merely a collection of animals. They are the foundation upon which your family's life quietly rests. A gentle breeze carries the distant sound of bells, not church bells. Small bells tied around the necks of a few older sheep grazing farther up the hillside. Their soft ringing drifts faintly across the valley. A peaceful reminder that your flock continues its afternoon meal. Your sheepdog hears them too. He raises his head, looks toward the hills, then calmly looks back at you, almost as if politely reminding you that lunch break cannot last forever. You smile. He is correct. The hills are waiting. The sheep are undoubtedly preparing another unnecessary adventure. You stand. Fasten your wool cloak once more. Pick up your shepherd's crook resting beside the doorway. The familiar weight settles comfortably into your hand. Outside, the highlands stretch endlessly beneath a sky, now filled with slow-moving white clouds. The breeze carries the scent of fresh grass, peat smoke, and blooming heather. Far above, the flock appears as tiny white dots scattered across green slopes. 42 quiet responsibilities. 42 gentle reminders that another peaceful afternoon has only just begun. You whistle softly. The sheepdog bounds happily ahead onto the winding path. Together, the two of you begin the steady climb back toward the waiting flock, leaving the warmth of the croft behind as the highlands welcome you once more into their endless, unhurried embrace. By the time you and your faithful sheepdog climb back to the upper pastures, the highlands have quietly changed once again. That is the peculiar habit of this land. Stay away for an hour, and the sky invents an entirely new personality. The bright blue morning has softened into layers of silver clouds drifting lazily over the mountains. Sunlight still finds its way through the gaps, painting broad patches of golden light that slowly wander across the hills like silent travelers. Your flock is exactly where you hoped it would be. Mostly. 42 sheep remain within sight, though together might be an overly generous description. They have arranged themselves into several little groups across the hillside, each convinced they have discovered the finest patch of grass in all of Scotland. Perhaps they have. You whistle softly. A few ears twitch. One sheep looks directly at you before immediately returning to the extremely important business of eating. You choose not to take it personally. The sheepdog trots ahead with quiet confidence, gently encouraging the scattered groups to drift closer together. There is no hurry. A rushed flock becomes a nervous flock. A calm flock remains peaceful. The afternoon breeze carries the sweet scent of flowering heather across the open hills. Purple blossoms stretch toward the horizon, covering entire slopes with soft color. Honeybees drift lazily between flowers, gathering nectar without the slightest concern for medieval responsibilities. The highlands feel timeless. Even now, hundreds of years before anyone will describe these landscapes in paintings or travel books, they possess a quiet beauty beyond words. Clouds continue gathering above the western mountains. You notice them immediately. Experience has taught you that weather always arrives from those distant ridges, sometimes gently, sometimes with remarkable enthusiasm. Today the clouds appear thick but calm, gray rather than black, steady rather than violent. Rain is coming, not a storm, simply one of the highlands' frequent reminders that dry clothing is only a temporary condition. You adjust your wool cloak around your shoulders. The sheep seem equally aware. Several lift their heads toward the wind before calmly returning to grazing. Unlike people, sheep rarely waste energy worrying about weather they cannot change. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. A cool breeze sweeps across the hillside. Heather bends gently beneath its touch. Tall grasses ripple in slow waves that spread across the valley, like invisible hands smoothing a blanket. The sheepdog pauses beside you. His nose lifts toward the air. He smells the approaching rain long before the first drop falls. Far away, thunder murmurs softly, not loud enough to frighten anyone, just distant enough to remind you that the sky remains wonderfully unpredictable. You continue leading the flock towards slightly lower ground, not because the rain is dangerous, because exposed ridges become uncomfortable once steady drizzle begins. A sheltered valley offers richer grass and a little protection from the wind. The journey is peaceful. Sheep move slowly. Some stop every few steps to enjoy another mouthful of grass. Others appear deeply committed to investigating particularly interesting bushes. One determined ram pauses to scratch himself against a weathered stone. Clearly, he believes personal comfort should never be delayed. You silently respect his priorities. Soon the first raindrop lands upon your sleeve. Then another. Tiny circles appear across the smooth surface of a nearby puddle. Within moments, a gentle rain begins falling over the highlands. Not heavy, not cold. Simply soft. Countless tiny drops drifting quietly from gray clouds above. The landscape changes almost instantly. Colors deepen. The grass becomes brighter. The heather grows richer. Every stone glistens beneath a thin layer of water. Mist begins rising once again from distant valleys, wrapping mountains in delicate white veils. The highlands seem even more magical beneath gentle rain. Your wool cloak grows slightly heavier as moisture settles into the fabric. Fortunately, thick woven wool performs remarkably well in damp weather. It may become wet, but it keeps much of its warmth. Centuries of Highland shepherds have trusted wool for very good reasons. The sheep, rather amusingly, continue eating. Rain appears to concern them very little. After all, each one carries an excellent wool coat everywhere it goes. Nature solved that problem long ago. Your sheepdog occasionally shakes tiny droplets from his thick fur, then returns immediately to work. His determination never seems affected by weather. You suppose someone has to remain professional around here. The gentle rain creates new sounds across the hills. Drops tap softly against broad leaves. Tiny streams trickle between stones. Water drips from overhanging branches with quiet rhythm. Farther down the valley, a small waterfall grows slightly louder as fresh rain feeds the stream above. It becomes a peaceful orchestra conducted entirely by clouds. You pause beneath a lone rowan tree growing from the hillside. Its bright red berries sway gently in the breeze. The branches offer little real shelter, but enough to soften the falling rain. From here you watch your flock spread across the damp meadow below. The sight feels strangely calming. White sheep, green hills, gray skies, purple heather, everything balanced perfectly. You realize how little this landscape demands. It asks only patience, respect, and careful observation. There are no shortcuts here, only seasons. Nearby, a pair of rabbits dart from one patch of grass to another before disappearing beneath tangled shrubs. A fox appears briefly along a distant ridge. It watches the flock for several quiet moments. Then, noticing your alert sheepdog, decides today's hunting opportunities probably lie elsewhere. Without urgency, it slips silently back into the mist. Life continues. No drama, no chase. Simply another small meeting between creatures sharing the same hills. The rain gradually begins to fade. Clouds thin. Tiny beams of sunlight pierce the overcast sky, creating brilliant shafts of golden light stretching down into the valleys. Each beam illuminates a different patch of hillside. The effect feels almost dreamlike. Moments later, someone standing farther away might swear heaven itself had reached down to touch the highlands. As sunlight strengthens, tiny droplets clinging to every blade of grass begin sparkling like scattered crystals. Even the sheep appear brighter beneath the returning light. One lamb bounds happily through the wet heather, splashing tiny drops in every direction before stopping suddenly to examine a flower with complete seriousness. You smile. Youth finds wonder in everything. Perhaps adults simply forget how. The sheepdog gives a gentle bark. Only once, just enough to encourage two wandering ewes back toward the center of the flock. They obey with surprising cooperation. Apparently, even sheep become slightly more reasonable after a pleasant rain. You continue walking beside them. Your boots leave faint prints in the softened earth. Behind you, the wind slowly erases them. Ahead lies another hillside waiting patiently beneath clearing skies. The afternoon stretches onward without urgency. No clocks, no deadlines, only the steady rhythm of footsteps, quiet bleeding, cool highland air, and the comforting certainty that wherever these gentle hills may lead, another peaceful pasture is always waiting just beyond the next rise. The rain leaves almost as quietly as it arrived. Within half an hour, the clouds begin drifting eastward, and the highlands breathe out a long, cool sigh. Tiny beads of water cling to every blade of grass, sparkling beneath the returning sunlight. The hills seem cleaner somehow, as though the rain has washed away every trace of dust and replaced it with fresh shades of green. The sheep hardly seem impressed. They continue eating. You suspect that if the sky suddenly decided to rain oat bread instead of water, they would still pause only briefly before returning to grass. Your faithful sheepdog trots a few steps ahead, stopping now and then to glance back at you. He has worked these hills for years, and he knows every winding path, every stream crossing, and every patch of rich pasture almost as well as you do. Together you continue toward the western grazing grounds. These hills are quieter. Fewer shepherds visit them because the land becomes rougher, with scattered rocks, steeper slopes, and narrow gullies hidden beneath thick heather. The sheep, naturally, find these places fascinating. You sometimes wonder whether sheep secretly compete to discover the most inconvenient grazing spot imaginable. The breeze grows cooler as afternoon slowly slips toward evening. Clouds cast long shadows across the valleys. Far beyond the distant ridges, pine forests form dark green lines against the mountains. Those forests are beautiful. They are also reminders that your flock is not alone in these highlands. Most days pass peacefully. Birds sing. Rabbits dart through the grass. Foxes quietly hunt mice. Red deer wander the glens. Nature keeps its balance without much interruption. But every shepherd understands that occasionally another visitor appears. Not often. Not every week. Sometimes not even every month. Yet the possibility always exists. A wolf. The thought never fills you with panic. Only attention. Wolves in medieval Scotland are neither monsters nor fairy tale villains. They are simply hunters trying to survive, much like every other creature crossing these ancient hills. They usually avoid people whenever possible. Still, a lonely sheep grazing too far from the flock might seem like an easy opportunity. That is why shepherding is less about fighting danger and more about preventing it. You pause upon a rocky rise overlooking the valley. From here you can see almost every sheep. 42 familiar white shapes spread gently across the hillside. Some graze. Others lie quietly chewing. Several lambs wander close to their mothers. Everything appears peaceful. Exactly the way you prefer it. The sheepdog suddenly stops walking. His ears stand upright. His body becomes completely still. You recognize that posture immediately. He has noticed something. You follow his gaze toward the edge of the distant forest. Nothing moves, only shadows beneath towering pine trees. Wind gently stirs the branches. For several moments, the valley remains perfectly calm. Then, movement. Far away. Almost impossible to notice. A gray shape slips silently between the trees before disappearing again. Perhaps a wolf. Perhaps only a large deer passing through deep shade. At this distance, certainty is impossible. You do not rush forward. There is no reason. The animal, whatever it may be, remains hundreds of yards away. Instead, you calmly gather the flock a little closer together. The sheepdog circles wide around the outer edge. His movements remain smooth and confident. No barking, no chasing, only gentle guidance. The sheep respond almost lazily. One by one they drift toward the center. There is comfort in staying together. Nature has taught them that lesson long before humans ever arrived. As the flock gathers, you quietly scan the valley once more. Nothing. The distant gray shape has vanished. Perhaps it noticed you. Perhaps it simply continued deeper into the forest. Either way, no danger remains. The highlands return to silence. You realize something interesting. Courage rarely feels dramatic. Most days it simply looks like staying calm while making sensible decisions. Stories often celebrate battles, Real shepherds celebrate peaceful afternoons in which nothing exciting happens. That, in many ways, is the greatest success. You continue walking. The sheepdog relaxes again, his tail wagging gently. Apparently he has concluded that the mysterious visitor has chosen a different direction. A few lambs begin hopping playfully over small rocks. One discovers a tiny puddle left behind by the rain and immediately steps into it with complete confidence. The splash seems to surprise him far more than anyone else. He stares at his wet hooves for several thoughtful seconds before deciding the puddle was entirely responsible. Nearby, an old ewe watches the performance with magnificent indifference. Wisdom often arrives with age. The afternoon grows quieter. Golden sunlight stretches across the glens. Tiny insects dance above patches of wildflowers. The scent of damp earth mixes with pine carried gently from the forest. You stop beside a broad flat stone overlooking the valley. This becomes your lookout for a while. The sheep spread comfortably across fresh pasture. The sheepdog settles beside your boots. His breathing slows. Even while resting, his eyes occasionally follow the movement of the flock. Trust never replaces attention. The two simply learn to live together. Above you, clouds drift slowly across an endless blue sky. A golden eagle circles high above the mountains. From this distance, it appears no larger than a leaf floating on the wind. Its wide wings hardly move. Air itself seems to carry it effortlessly across the highlands. You watch for several peaceful minutes. No one speaks. No one needs to. The hills provide enough conversation. Wind whispers through tall grass. A distant stream murmurs between smooth stones. Occasional sheep bleat softly before returning to grazing. Everything settles into a gentle rhythm that feels almost timeless. As shadows slowly lengthen, you rise once more. Evening is still several hours away, but the flock must gradually begin moving towards safer grazing nearer the crofts before darkness arrives. You whistle softly. The sheepdog stands immediately. Without excitement, without hesitation, simply ready. Together, you begin guiding the flock along a winding hillside path, where ancient stone outcrops catch the warm golden light of the lowering sun. Behind you, the distant forest grows darker beneath the fading afternoon. Whatever creature passed quietly through its shadows has long since disappeared. Ahead, your sheep continue their slow, peaceful journey, surrounded by open skies, endless green hills, and the quiet certainty that another gentle highland evening is waiting just beyond the next ridge. The golden light of late afternoon settles gently across the highlands, softening every hill and valley beneath a warm amber glow. Your flock moves at an unhurried pace. No one seems eager to end the day. Not the sheep, not your faithful dog, not even you. There is something peaceful about the final hours before sunset, when the world begins slowing without anyone needing to announce it. The wind loses its afternoon energy. Birdsong becomes less frequent. Even the clouds seem content to drift rather than hurry. You guide the flock along a familiar path that winds between ancient stones and patches of blooming heather. This trail has been used for generations. Long before your grandfather walked here. Long before his grandfather did. Countless shepherds have followed these same gentle curves through the highlands. The earth beneath your boots remembers every one of them. Ahead, thin streams of smoke rise into the still evening air. The village is not far now. It is a small gathering of stone crofts tucked comfortably into the shelter of a broad valley, where the hills help block the strongest winter winds. From a distance, it almost disappears into the landscape. Gray stone against gray stone. Thatched roofs blending with the earth. Nothing grand. Nothing wasteful. Simply homes built to last. As you approach, familiar sounds slowly replace the quiet of the hills. Children laugh while chasing one another between cottages. A blacksmith's hammer rings softly against hot iron. Somewhere nearby, chickens complain loudly about matters only chickens truly understand. A wooden cart creaks along a narrow dirt path pulled by a patient ox. Life continues with the steady rhythm it has followed for generations. No one rushes. There is little reason to. Several villagers notice your flock returning. A few raise a hand in greeting. You answer with a nod and a warm smile. Words are often unnecessary among neighbors who see one another nearly every day. Everyone understands how the day has likely gone. The weather, the grazing, The endless search for sheep determined to invent new adventures. One elderly shepherd sits comfortably upon a smooth stone outside his croft. His beard is almost completely white now. His weathered hands rest upon a wooden crook polished by decades of use. You suspect he could probably identify every sheep in the valley simply by watching the way it walks. He smiles as your flock passes. Any trouble today? His voice carries the calm confidence of someone who already expects the answer. Only sheep being sheep, you reply. He laughs quietly. Then it was a good day. You cannot argue with that. Nearby, women spread freshly washed wool across wooden drying racks. Bright white fleece catches the golden sunlight, glowing almost silver beneath the evening sky. Several younger villagers carefully spin cleaned wool into long strands of yarn. The spinning wheels hum steadily, round and round, round and round. The sound blends beautifully with distant birdsong. Children help gather small bundles of firewood from neatly stacked piles beside each cottage. Every pair of hands has work to do. Even the youngest members of the village understand that winter always arrives eventually. Preparation never truly ends. You guide your sheep into a sturdy stone enclosure built beside the village. The low walls keep the flock together overnight, while still allowing fresh evening air to drift through. The sheep enter without much encouragement. After a full day grazing across the highlands, they seem almost relieved to settle somewhere familiar. Several lambs immediately curl beside their mothers. Others continue nibbling tiny patches of grass growing between the stones. Apparently, bedtime snacks have existed for quite some time. The sheepdog makes one final slow circle around the enclosure. Only when he is completely satisfied does he wander back toward you. You kneel beside him and gently scratch behind his ears. His thick fur remains slightly damp from the afternoon rain. His eyes close happily. If anyone deserves praise today, it is certainly him. Without his quiet patience, your flock would probably be scattered across half of Scotland by now. As evening deepens, the village becomes wrapped in warm smells. Fresh oat bread bakes inside several crofts. Peat fires burn steadily. Barley soup simmers above open hearths. Wood smoke drifts lazily upward before disappearing into the cool highland air. It is impossible not to feel hungry. A nearby family invites you to share a simple evening meal. Such invitations are common. Life in these remote valleys depends upon neighbors helping one another whenever possible. Today you share bread. Tomorrow perhaps you help repair someone's stone wall. Another day you assist during lambing season. Kindness travels in quiet circles. Inside the croft, candles flicker softly against rough stone walls. The fire fills the room with comfortable warmth. Simple wooden bowls are placed upon the table. Barley broth, fresh bread, a small piece of smoked cheese. Nothing extravagant. Everything appreciated. Conversation remains gentle. Someone mentions seeing red deer near the eastern glen. Another villager believes tomorrow may bring clear skies. An elderly grandmother quietly tells children one of the old Highland tales about tiny fairies said to dance beneath moonlit hills. The children listen with enormous eyes. You suspect they believe every single word. Perhaps that makes the stories even better. Outside, daylight slowly begins fading. The first evening star appears above the western mountains. One by one, tiny lights emerge across the sky. Without city lights, the heavens seem wonderfully endless. The Milky Way slowly stretches overhead like a pale river flowing through darkness. You step outside for a moment. Cool evening air brushes gently across your face. The village grows quieter. Doors close. Animals settle. Only the occasional soft bleat rises from the sheep enclosure nearby. The highlands seem to exhale. Standing there beneath countless stars, you realize how small your little village truly is. Just a handful of homes surrounded by hills that have stood for thousands of years. Yet within those few homes lives an entire world. Families, friendships, traditions, work shared across every season. No one here seeks fame. No one expects history books to remember their names. Still, their lives matter deeply. They care for one another. They care for the land, and the land quietly returns that care. Your sheepdog nudges your hand gently. Perhaps he believes you have admired the stars long enough. Perhaps he is simply hoping dinner includes another piece of oat bread. Either possibility seems entirely reasonable. You smile, give his head one more affectionate pat, and together the two of you walk slowly toward the warm glow of the croft, where firelight flickers through the tiny window, and another peaceful Highland evening is only just beginning. Morning returns to the Highlands with remarkable gentleness. There is no sudden burst of sunlight. Instead, pale silver light slowly spills over the eastern ridges, touching one hill after another until the valleys gradually emerge from the lingering mist. Dew sparkles across every blade of grass, and the cool air carries the familiar scent of damp earth, peat smoke, and flowering heather. Your sheep are already awake. Well, most of them. A few appear determined to continue standing perfectly still while chewing yesterday's memories. You have long since accepted that sheep greet the morning with considerably less enthusiasm than birds. Your faithful sheepdog stretches outside the croft, gives one impressive yawn, and looks towards you with the calm confidence of someone ready for another ordinary day. Today, however, is not entirely ordinary. The season has changed. The thick wool that has protected your flock through the cold months has now become far too heavy. The warm days of late spring are arriving, and every shepherd knows what that means. Shearing season has begun. For weeks you have watched the sheep growing fluffier with every passing sunrise. Some now resemble small walking clouds, with legs hidden somewhere beneath enormous coats of wool. A few seem almost surprised each time they discover they still possess feet. Nature has been generous this year. The pasture remained healthy. Winter passed without great hardship. Most of the flock appears strong and well fed. That means there will be plenty of good fleece for spinning into yarn and weaving into cloth. In the Highlands, wool is more than comfort. It is warmth. It is trade. It is survival. Without it, winter would become a far more difficult companion. After a simple breakfast of oat bread and fresh milk, you gather the few tools needed for the day's work. Unlike many crafts, sheep shearing requires surprisingly little equipment. A sturdy pair of heavy iron shears, strong hands, patience, and ideally, sheep willing to cooperate. Unfortunately, only 3 of those requirements are usually available. The villagers gather in an open grassy field near the crofts, where the morning sun quickly dries the dew. Shearing is rarely done alone. Neighbors help one another. One household today, another tomorrow. By the end of the season, every flock will have lighter coats, and every family will have fresh wool to prepare for the months ahead. The atmosphere feels almost festive. Children chase one another through the grass, while older villagers prepare baskets for collecting fleece. Someone hums a quiet Highland melody. A woman places fresh oat cakes upon a wooden table for everyone to share later. Work and community blend together so naturally that it becomes impossible to separate them. Your first customer, if sheep could technically be customers, is a particularly large ram. He eyes you suspiciously. You eye him equally carefully. Neither of you entirely trust the other. With gentle encouragement and steady hands, you guide him into position. The sheepdog watches closely but remains perfectly calm. He knows excitement accomplishes very little today. You kneel beside the ram and carefully begin cutting. The heavy iron shears make a steady rhythm. Snip, snip, snip. Each careful movement removes another strip of thick wool. You work slowly, never rushing. A careless cut could injure the animal. Good shepherds value patience far above speed. The ram remains surprisingly cooperative. Perhaps he has decided that resisting requires more effort than simply waiting. Or perhaps he secretly appreciates the thought of cooler summer days. Within several minutes, a remarkable transformation appears. The enormous woolly creature sitting before you becomes a much slimmer sheep than anyone remembered. The children nearby begin laughing. One whispers that the ram looks almost embarrassed. Even you cannot hide a smile. Freshly shorn sheep often appear slightly confused by their own smaller shadows. The thick fleece comes away in one large piece, soft, warm, remarkably heavy. You lift it carefully into a waiting basket. Someone else will wash it later, then card it, then spin it into yarn. Eventually it may become blankets, cloaks, stockings, or warm winter clothing. Every thread begins here. By midday, several more sheep have been shorn. White fleece fills basket after basket. The field itself begins looking as though tiny clouds have fallen gently to earth. The air smells faintly of fresh lanolin, the natural oil within the wool. It is earthy, rich, comfortingly familiar. Children cannot resist touching the newly collected fleece. Its softness always surprises them. One young boy proudly announces that he wants to become a shepherd when he grows older. His father smiles. "Spend one winter on these hills," he says gently. "Then tell me again." Everyone laughs quietly. Even the boy. He probably still means every word. During a short break, you sit beneath a broad oak tree overlooking the village. The sheepdog lies beside your boots, happily accepting a small piece of oat bread. He has certainly earned it. Nearby, women begin sorting different grades of wool. The finest fleece is placed carefully aside. Rougher wool will become blankets or sturdy clothing for everyday work. Nothing goes to waste. Even the smallest scraps eventually find a purpose. A breeze drifts through the valley carrying the scent of wildflowers. Honeybees continue visiting blossoms, completely unaware that an entire village has gathered nearby. Life keeps its quiet rhythm. The mountains stand watch over everything. After resting, the work begins again. Another ewe, another ram, another basket filled with wool. Hour after hour, the steady sound of iron shears continues. Snip, snip, snip. It becomes strangely relaxing, almost musical. Some villagers begin singing old Highland songs while they work. The melodies drift gently across the fields. Simple voices, simple harmonies, no grand performance. Only neighbors, sharing another ordinary day together. As the afternoon sun lowers slightly, the freshly shorn sheep wander back into nearby pasture. Without their thick coats, they move more lightly. Several lambs seem almost surprised to recognize their own mothers. One circles a ewe twice before deciding she looks familiar enough. You quietly suspect appearances matter less to sheep than smell. Nature usually arranges these things sensibly. You walk among the flock once more, checking each animal carefully. No cuts, no injuries. Only lighter coats and noticeably happier expressions. The sheepdog trots beside you, occasionally glancing up as though asking whether the day's work has been satisfactory. You nod. He seems pleased with that answer. The baskets of wool now sit neatly beneath covered shelters, safe from any unexpected highland rain. They represent months of warmth yet to come. Blankets for winter nights. Cloaks against cold winds. Trade with neighboring villages. Comfort earned through patient work beneath open skies. As the long afternoon begins drifting toward evening, the last rays of sunlight settle softly across the freshly shorn flock. They graze peacefully, looking smaller than they did only hours before. The highlands grow quiet once again. Another season has gently turned. Another task has been completed. And with your shepherd's crook resting lightly in your hand and your loyal dog faithfully at your side, you watch the sheep wander through the glowing fields, knowing that even the simplest work can become something quietly beautiful when shared with patient hands and kind neighbors. The excitement of shearing season slowly fades into memory, and the highlands settle once again into their familiar, unhurried rhythm. The baskets of wool have been stored safely inside dry sheds. Spinning wheels hum softly within the crofts. The sheep, noticeably lighter without their heavy winter coats, wander the hills with surprising energy. You almost wonder if they are showing off. Several lambs race around their mothers as though the entire world has suddenly become one enormous playground. Your faithful sheepdog watches them with patient tolerance. He has learned that lambs possess an endless supply of enthusiasm and almost no understanding of direction. The morning breeze carries the scent of fresh grass mixed with the sweetness of blooming gorse flowers. Bright yellow blossoms cover parts of the hillside, shining beneath the soft sunlight like tiny lanterns scattered across the landscape. The highlands feel especially peaceful today. No rain threatens the sky. No heavy winds sweep across the ridges. Even the distant mountains appear gentle beneath pale blue clouds. You guide the flock toward one of the oldest grazing grounds in the valley. The path winds beside an ancient standing stone that has stood there for longer than anyone in the village can remember. No one knows exactly who placed it there. Some say it was raised by forgotten kings. Others believe it marks the resting place of a great warrior. The oldest villagers simply shrug and say the stone has always been there. In medieval Scotland, not every mystery demands an answer. As you pass, you rest your hand briefly against the weathered surface. It feels cool despite the warming day. Lichen covers much of the gray stone. Tiny cracks have deepened over centuries of rain, frost, and wind. Time itself seems carved into its surface. Your grandmother once told you that travelers should always greet the old stones politely. Not because the stones expect manners, because respecting old things reminds people to remain humble. Whether the story is true hardly matters. The habit remains. The sheep continue past without the slightest interest in ancient history. Grass, after all, has always been more fascinating than archaeology. Farther along the trail, the sound of a distant church bell drifts gently across the valley. The small stone church sits upon a low hill, overlooking several scattered crofts. Its bell rings only a few times each day. The sound is never hurried. It simply reminds everyone that another peaceful morning has arrived. Most Sundays, families gather there wearing their warmest wool cloaks. The building itself is simple. Rough stone walls, wooden benches, a plain wooden cross, no grand decorations. Yet the little church offers something valuable beyond shelter. It gives neighbors a place to meet, to share news, to comfort one another during difficult seasons, to celebrate births, to mourn losses. Life feels lighter when shared. You rarely think deeply about such things while walking behind sheep. Yet somehow the quiet hills invite quiet thoughts. The flock spreads across another rich pasture. You settle upon a smooth rock overlooking the glen, while your sheepdog stretches comfortably beside you. A gentle silence fills the morning. Only the soft tearing of grass, the distant call of curlews, and the whispering breeze interrupt the stillness. From somewhere beyond the ridge comes the faint sound of someone playing a wooden flute. The melody drifts through the air so softly that you almost wonder if the wind itself has learned music. You never discover who the musician is. Perhaps another shepherd, perhaps a traveler following the old roads. The notes float over the hills before fading naturally into silence. Some songs ask for applause. Others simply belong to the landscape. Your grandmother also loved stories. On long winter evenings beside the peat fire, she spoke of creatures hidden within the highlands, tiny fair folk dancing beneath moonlight, water spirits living inside quiet locks, gentle household brownies said to help hardworking families during the night if treated kindly. As a child, you believed every tale. As an adult, you smile whenever you remember them. Whether such creatures truly exist almost becomes unimportant. The stories themselves carry lessons. Respect the rivers. Care for your home. Do not wander carelessly after dark. Treat strangers with kindness. Leave certain places untouched. Sometimes folklore teaches wisdom more gently than rules ever could. A cool breeze passes through the heather. The purple flowers sway together like gentle waves across the hills. Your sheep hardly notice. One particularly determined ewe continues chewing with extraordinary concentration. You begin suspecting she could eat peacefully through almost any legend. Nearby, a pair of ravens land upon a weathered stone wall. They watch the valley with intelligent black eyes before taking flight once more. Their wings beat slowly against the bright sky. For generations, ravens have appeared in Highland stories as messengers, tricksters, or wise observers. To you, today they simply seem like birds enjoying a pleasant morning. Reality often proves peaceful enough without adding magic. Still, when mist curls gently around distant hills, when ancient standing stones rise silently from green fields, when forgotten paths disappear into forests older than memory, it becomes easy to understand why stories were born here. The land invites imagination. Even without believing every tale, you find comfort in them. Perhaps every place deserves its mysteries. The sheepdog suddenly lifts his head. Not because danger approaches. A familiar figure is walking across the valley. It is the village priest making his weekly journey between scattered crofts. His cloak moves gently in the breeze as he follows the narrow footpath. When he reaches you, he smiles warmly. "Peaceful morning," he says. "It usually is," you answer. He glances toward the grazing flock. They seem content. They always are when the grass is good. He laughs softly. People could learn something from sheep. You consider the idea, perhaps. Although people might reasonably hope for conversations slightly more interesting than constant discussions about grass. The priest continues his journey, after wishing you a pleasant day. His footsteps soon disappear into the distant hills. The sheep remain exactly where they were before the conversation began. Their priorities have not changed. The sun climbs higher. Shadows grow shorter. Warmth spreads across the glen. The standing stone remains motionless. The church bell falls silent. The flute melody has long faded into memory. Only the quiet rhythm of grazing sheep continues. You realize that faith, folklore, and everyday work all share something unexpected. Each offers people a way to understand the world around them. Some find comfort in prayer, some in old stories, some simply in watching another peaceful sunrise over the highlands. None of these need compete with one another. Together they create the quiet fabric of life in medieval Scotland. You rise slowly, brush the grass from your cloak, and give a gentle whistle. Your faithful sheepdog stands at once. The flock begins drifting toward the next hillside, moving calmly beneath the endless highland sky. Behind you, the ancient standing stone grows smaller with every step. Ahead, another peaceful day waits patiently among the rolling green hills.